Good afternoon, good evening. It is our pleasure to present to you today our post pandemic mental health virtual forum. It is sponsored by Oak Grove United Methodist Church and the South Carolina Christian Action Council. I apologize for the background. And so, our outline for this evening will be as follows. You'll have the welcome and purpose, which we're going over now. We're going to establish our virtual decorum. We're going to introduce our panelists, and we have quite a panel of esteemed guests today. Our opening statements will come from each of our panelists. We'll have questions and dialogue, which will also include questions that you will put in the chat, and that's for all or any of the methods that of social media that you may be on. We'll have concluding statements, and then we will have our closing. I am Dr. Deneen Fleming, with a picture that decides to go sideways, and I'm your moderator for this evening. And Dr. Toya Glenn is serving in the capacity of as the person who is running everything from behind the scenes. And so she's making it all work together. Thank you, Dr. Glenn. As you may or may not know from all of everything that we've posted and everything that we've had available, our purpose for this evening is to bring awareness of COVID-19's impact on mental health. And so the panel of experts tonight will talk about that in a dialogue in a friendly way, but just ways that we can think about how our mental health has been or how mental health has been, not necessarily ours. It could be everybody's, anybody's impacted by COVID-19 and its impact. So our virtual decorum, we're looking at just making sure we respect the opinions of others. Everybody should be respected, whether it's in the chat as we're having conversations. You place your questions in the chat or you wait to be recognized for dialogue. And we want everyone to be open to learning and engaging, however that may be for you. We do have a disclaimer this evening, and our disclaimer is that all of the information is personal in nature and based on the expertise of the panelists. They cannot provide any medical diagnoses or advice other than they're answering questions. They want to make sure they answer your questions, but it is their beliefs as well as their opinions. And the host is not responsible for information shared by individuals. So not holding anyone liable. It is dialogue to really get to what's going on and how we can be able to help each other. So we will begin by our introductions this evening. I'm not sure if you can see that my screen is bouncing. I don't know what's going on, but if you listen to the voice, if this gets distracting, I can turn my camera off because that's not what's important. We're going to start first with our introduction, and it's going to be Dr. Chanel Fields.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening.
Good evening. And Dr. Chanel Fields is a native of Florence, South Carolina. Her education includes a BA in English education from the College of Charleston, a master's in school counseling from the Citadel Military College, and a PhD in human services and counseling from Capella University. From 2002 to 2020, she was a middle and high school English teacher and a professional school counselor. In November 2018, she completed her supervision to become an LPC and has opened a private practice in Somerville. Dr. Chanel works to help others who are struggling with issues of self-esteem, grief, anxiety, and depression. Due to her love of education and counseling, she has given many presentations, speeches, and motivational messages to encourage others. Her proudest accomplishment is raising her son as a single parent, working full-time, and completing her doctorate. Congratulations. Dr. Fields knows what it is to be in a stuck place. In July of 2021, Dr. Fields wrote a #1 Amazon best-selling book entitled I Am Enough. This book is a self-reflection and motivation for women and young ladies who are feeling undervalued and passed over. More recently, she became an international bestseller for being a co-author of the book entitled Women Motivated by Purpose. This anthology seeks to motivate others to live life with purpose. Dr. Fields is also an adjunct professor for Liberty University in their community counseling and school counseling departments. She hones aspiring counselor skills through her love of God and experience. Additionally, Dr. Fields founded the Healing Group, which is a directory of African American mental health professionals. And for further inquiry, there is a website, www.thehealinggroupgrp.com, and we will put it in the chat. Her mottos are every day you have the chance to change two people's lives, yours and someone else's, and to always remember you are enough. And we will put all of the contact information in the chat. So welcome, Dr. Fields.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here and to share.
Thank you. Next, we will have Mrs. Alice West.
Hi.
Thank you. Mrs. Alice West received a BA degree from the distinguished oldest HBCU in the state of South Carolina, Claflin University, and a MED from the Citadel Military College. Her professional licenses in South Carolina include licensed professional counselor, licensed professional counselor supervisor, licensed addictions counselor, licensed master social worker. She has worked in the field of addictions, geriatrics, and mental health. She served as the clinic director for Dorchester Mental Health in Somerville from 1992 to 1999. She retired from Charleston Dorchester Mental Health in 2018. She has been providing therapeutic services in the Tri-County area for more than 30 years. Springview Counseling is the name of her private practice in Goose Creek, South Carolina. She believes in the power of God and the power of prayer. She supports and incorporates faith in therapy when desired by those whom she serves. She strongly believes in self-care and that we all count. Mrs. Alice West. Thank you. Next, Reverend Lori Tomlin. Reverend Lori Tomlin is a native of Cottageville, South Carolina, and currently resides in Somerville, South Carolina. He received a Bachelor of Science in Philosophy and Religion in 2015 and a Master of Arts in Professional Counseling in 2018 from Liberty University. He was awarded an honorary Doctor of Divinity degree in 2016 from the Body of Christ Bible College in Columbia, South Carolina. Reverend Tomlin is a licensed professional counselor and a national certified counselor. Reverend Tomlin is the pastor of Oak Grove and St. John United Methodist Churches in Ridgeville and Dorchester, South Carolina, and he is employed by Roper St. Francis Healthcare as the behavioral health coordinator and clinical therapist for the Ryan White Wellness Center in Charleston. He is also the owner of Integral Counseling LLC, located in Somerville, South Carolina. Reverend Tomlin.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And last but not least is Miss Jessica Rojas. Miss Rojas is a Charleston native by way of Wilmington, Delaware, and Philadelphia. As both of her parents are from the Northeast, Jessica spent many years of her life there. For this reason, she is considered both a Southern and Northern belle. She studied business administration at Temple University with a major in real estate and finance and minor in Spanish. Spending many years working in corporate America, working for some of the nation's largest Fortune 500 companies, she began a search for fulfillment and meaning. In 2008, she founded the Red Shoe Inc., a nonprofit organization focused on women's empowerment. The Red Shoe Incorporated hosted monthly psychoeducational groups for women and was highly active in the West Palm Beach, Florida area, doing philanthropic work. To understand her desire to help women free themselves emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, Jessica returned to school to pursue her master's in Christian clinical psychology with a concentration in Christian counseling and graduated in 2012 from Palm Beach Atlantic University. Congratulations. Today, Jessica wears a variety of hats. She is a single parent of two beautiful children, clinical supervisor for school-based mental health for 11 schools. Let me say that again, for 11 schools in North Charleston, owner and broker in charge for anything real estate, and lastly, founder and therapist at Refreshed Total Wellness Christian Counseling Center for Women, which was founded in May of 2020, located in Summerville, South Carolina. Jessica is passionately living her life's purpose, helping people free their minds by combating childhood trauma, overcoming negative beliefs that have been deeply rooted, while allowing women to walk in their truth through assertive communication, operating through the foundation of faith, and becoming fearless in the face of challenges. Presently, she is a licensed professional counselor associate and will be fully licensed to take insurance June 2023. Countdown. For now, she provides therapy on a sliding scale to offer financial plans for all. Her practice is growing daily, and women are getting healed and delivered. Ms. Rojas uses evidence based practices like dialectical behavioral therapy, which infuses spirituality. She also practices cognitive behavioral therapy and motivational interviewing. Further, she is nationally rostered to provide trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy for children ages 4 through 17. She lives her life to the best of her ability to be a Proverbs 31 woman. She has taken her personal hardships and has turned them into the canvas that she allows God to paint upon and yet create. She is effervescent, refined, growing, healing, and sharing love and kindness to all of God's people. Her brand is simply kindness to all of humanity. Miss Jessica Rojas.
Thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure. Thank you all for joining us. And there will be some people who will say, oh my goodness, was all of that necessary? How in the world would you have someone before you and you're not even willing to listen to who they have and what they have to offer? And so I'm honored to be in each of your presence, as I know everyone else is, because there's just so much. So we're not going to delay. We're going to go straight into the first question. No, not the first question, your opening statements. So we will go in the order, starting with Dr. Fields, followed by Mrs. West, Reverend Tomlin, and Ms. Rojas. Anything you would like to say in opening to everyone who was on this evening?
Good evening to everyone. Welcome, welcome. First thing I would like to say, I hope that everyone is moving forward, even in the aftermath and in the throes of present COVID. First of all, I just want to say that I hope that you are taking care of yourselves, whatever that looks like, whatever space that's in, that you are practicing large amounts of self-care. Self-care doesn't always have to be something that you spend money on. It's about devoting time to yourself. And I strongly believe that we can live well if we are taking the right steps to do so. So I am ecstatic about this opportunity to talk about that. And I enjoy helping people, nurturer at heart. So when the light bulb comes on, my heart is warm and it is filled.
Good evening to everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you this evening. 2020 and 2021 and some parts of 2022, as we are in currently, have been a challenging time for many of us. However, we have held on strong. And as the folks in my old church would say, press on. And so with that, anxiety and all of the other many issues have come across our plates over the last couple of years. And this evening, I just hope that we are able to, we will be able to share thoughts and stories, maybe enlighten you or refresh you, or even help us all to reclaim whatever we lost in 2020 and 2021. It's your story. It's our story. We're here to help each other. Enjoy the evening.
Good evening, everyone. First, I want to, as the pastor of Oak Grove, who is actually the sponsor of this forum, I wanted to first thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your day to listen to these great panelists that have taken time out of their schedule to be with us on today. And I'm just so overwhelmed to be in the presence of so many great professionals and people who are committed to this work, the work of healing and helping. Um, I concur with all of what has been said so far. I think this is an opportunity for all of us to learn and grow. It doesn't mean that anything wrong. I believe I come from a standpoint that people are doing the best that they can, but it doesn't mean that you can't do better moving forward or doing better in the future. And so I am honored to have this conversation with you, and stick around. Hopefully, you'll get something that you can take with you for the rest of your life.
Oh, my mic was muted, so I'm back on. I just want to say thank you guys so much for taking the time out to listen. I wrote down just a few things, and one of the thoughts that occurred to me is that if you signed in, and if you're logging in, and if you're watching, then you recognize the need and the urgency for us to address mental health. Certainly, we know that after COVID, as practitioners, the rates for anxiety and depression have certainly increased. And I also believe that COVID has given us an opportunity to do some deep reflection. And many of us have decided to part ways with former companies and to begin our own companies. And I also believe that we've had an opportunity to be a lot more introspective regarding our own mental health and mental status. So I pray that tonight's session that we have here with all these wonderful people enlightens you and empowers you, and potentially has you walk away with skills that you can use to manage your challenges that you may be facing in life. So thank you all, and I'm super excited to be here this evening.
Thank each of you. And we are going to start. We're going to get right into it with everyone have this question, at least the beginning. And the first question is simply going to be, what are some things we can do to reset post-pandemic? What are some things we can do to reset? Starting with Dr. Fields.
Great question. Some things that we can do. I feel like there should be, number one, an acknowledgement and an acceptance of what's happened. It is hard to move forward if we cannot be in the space that we've acknowledged. Unfortunately, we've lost a lot of people due to COVID. Grief is overwhelming. It is heartbreaking, and it is not sporadic or even intermittent. It is very dominant and happens and comes whenever it feels like coming. So I feel like we need to first acknowledge what has happened and embrace it, meaning meet it where it is. If you've realized that being in the house and your job transitioning from working in a building to working from home has exacerbated your depression, what do you need to do to try to mitigate those symptoms? Do you need to make sure that you have a clear break from work, from your work day to your home or afternoon time? Do you need to make sure that you're out in the air more often, that you're getting a break and going outside? So I feel like it's, number one, acknowledging what it is, but also recognizing that there are changes to be made. This is our new normal. How can I live in this new normal and still have joy in this new place?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Mrs. West.
Thank you. That is a great question. I think that in resetting, we are looking for some new sense of stability, renewed stability. And I think a great deal of it has to do with all of what we'll talk about tonight, but which will include our eating habits. We probably picked up some rough eating habits during COVID-19, during the pandemic. Moving forward, we need to monitor that. We need to also exercise more. And as my fellow colleague just said, get outside, get that fresh air in again. we want to recognize that isolation took place, and we need to connect with others more as we move forward, and also get a sense of renewed sleep patterns going. So sleep, exercise, eating habits, and of course, getting out and reaching out and touching each other, decreasing isolation. So those four things for sure, I would certainly emphasize.
Thank you. Reverend Tomlin.
Yeah. So, of course, there are so many things that we can do. And as Dr. Field said, one of the things that I think we have been afforded an opportunity for a new beginning. We've been afforded an opportunity to explore new possibilities, being open to what we have to live with now. These new people call them new norms. I don't know if that causes any anxiety or triggers anything inside anybody. But also acceptance. This is where we are,
Mhm.
and it is what it is.
Sure.
And it may be painful, it may be difficult, but you don't have to suffer. And suffering is a result of denial and rejection. And I don't want this, and I want to go back to the old way, and this and that.
Mhm.
Eh, you know, embrace what we have, and use it as an opportunity to grow, self care, explore yourself, explore those things you've been desiring to, those hobbies you've been thinking about, and just hadn't had the time to do it. If there's still a time to actually engage in those things. But to sum it all up, being open. What does this new day, this new era, what does it have to offer to me? How can I still be me and be joyous? Yeah, and fulfilled. Yeah.
Mm, I like that.
Thank you. And Ms. Rojas.
Yes. So I'm going to go back to my original point when I talked about COVID-19, the pandemic giving us an opportunity to go inward. And as we have all experienced, many people have left the traditional corporate American world to foster new businesses and to do things creatively that they've always wanted to do. Within that, I think is also the opportunity for us to consider what we've been through and the ability that we've had, because we're all still here for those of us who have come through COVID, and focus on resiliency. So whenever I'm working with patients, part of what I tend to do towards the latter part of therapy, or sometimes even in the middle, is work towards protective factors or things that we can use to keep ourselves in place. Protective factors or resiliency factors are the things that allow us to get back up after a difficult time. And in fact, what we are doing right now is we are getting back up as a people.
Mhm.
And so I'm not going to take long, but I just want to acknowledge that there's 6 areas that I like to, and maybe even 7, consider in protective factors. I think your number one protective factor would be morals and values, and who you are as a person. So when difficult times come, you're living within those principles.
Mhm.
And going back to another panelist who had spoken about relationships, social support is a huge part of mental health. I have 2 wonderful aunts in my life who I have to give odes to and credit to. They are a part of my mental health. They are a part of my tribe. I can talk to them. There's science behind talk therapy. We know all of that works. In addition, coping skills, as Pastor Lori was saying, finding about yourself, things that work for you, getting yourself involved in, using your 5 senses. What can you drink? What can you taste? I could go on. Physical health, once again, was already discussed. The importance of having a balanced diet, exercise releases endorphins. Those things help you feel better. And for many of us who are in the field and not in the field, having a sense of purpose in the work that we do every single day is really important. And that work doesn't have to be physical work at where we get paid, but it could be our involvement with family members, our children, our loved ones, our community groups, our churches. And then healthy thinking, most certainly being able to focus on the positive and the things that we have survived after COVID and what we do still presently have, and then what's to come. And then lastly, focusing on oneself, the self-esteem. So again, protective factors and resiliency for me is the driving force when I initiate conversation regarding the pandemic.
Thank you. Wow, I'm taking all kinds of copious notes, and I'm texting my college students and everybody like, y'all should be on what you're doing. You should really be paying attention. I know it's tape, but nothing like live.
Yes.
So I'm going to begin with yet another question, and it will be start with Dr. Fields, and if anyone once she answers wants to chime in, that's fine, and then we'll go to other questions and monitoring the chat still. So Dr. Fields, why is it so difficult for believers to embrace counseling, therapy, and other ways of coping besides prayer and Jesus?
Such a probing yet deep, profound, innovative, creative, whatever question you want to go to, and all of the above. I feel so. Let me start where I think historically it comes from, especially in the African American community. We, unfortunately, we were slaves. So during that time of slavery, we did not have mental health therapists. We did not have ways to cope. Our only ways of coping were being in camaraderie with our other slaves who were in the same spaces and very hostile environments in which we lived. So that was our mental health. We talked to each other. We cried with each other. And we called out to God to help us get out of this bind, this prison that we were in. So I understand the thought process behind it. God was our only savior, our only hope. It is where we look to. The only way that we knew to get relief was that he would remove us from the situation, or he would remove the situation from us. Often that meant death for many slaves, and being torn apart from their families and the people and the things that they knew. So it stems historically from, I feel like, oppression and slavery. And it has manifested through the years, through Jim Crow and Reconstruction. Again, African Americans being in situations where they had no power, they had no choice, no position to make changes. However, now we do have ways to change things. I am a very proud believer, but I believe that God sends us to work through him, to send his thought processes. One of my favorite things to say is, I believe he gave us a way out. If he wanted us to live and be unhappy, he would not have given us salvation. So I feel like he wants us to live well. He gave us these promises that he would take care of us, that he will make ways out of no way, that he would provide for us. But the old saying and the cliche, I'm paraphrasing, that faith without works is dead. He wants to know what else you are going to do to facilitate living well. What actions are you going to take? So I feel like we cling to that God will take care of it. God often sends rams in bushes, but do you see the ram in the bush? Are you open to receive the blessing that he is sending down? Do you see the person that he's sending it through? And so that could be from a therapist, that could be from your next door neighbor. So I believe that there are other ways alongside prayer and taking it to your pastor or taking it to your deacon, that he sends help for you. So that is my thought process, but I know it is very prevalent in the African American community, and counseling is just kind of catching on with African Americans, that there are other ways to handle issues.
Thank you. Is there anyone that wants to chime in on that question before we go to the another? Yes.
I would. I first want to say that I totally agree with Dr. Fields. Slavery happened in the minds of African Americans in many ways. And I think that, and not only that, but there has culturally, we've been impacted as a people. And, we know that there's, in the 90 percentiles, most of African Americans are in jail. So we know the system is not built for us. And again, that goes back to Jim Crow, that goes back to slavery. And so it started in our mind, to be able to get, people to feel like they need to be subjected. It was here where they manipulated us. And going back to what Ms. Fields said, or Dr. Fields said, is that we didn't have the coping skills. So part of the issue that we face in the Black church and in the African American church is that There is, I think, negative connotation connected to us. I want to say that counseling is already happening in the church. The pastor every Sunday is actually speaking to a group of people to provide counsel. And
Mhm.
so I could go on. There are a couple scriptures that I have that I was able to look up, and I found that at least 25 of them reference counseling. And so in Romans 12, 5-7, it says, "So in Christ we are many are one body, from each member belongs to the other. We have different gifts, which I will talk about, according to the grace given to us. If one is prophecy, let him use it, and in proportion to his faith." And then it says, if over here, if it is serving, let him serve. If it is teaching, let him teach. I bring up that scripture because oftentimes I think it's easy for us to, as a people, to go to the dentist when we need dental work, or to go to um, our chiropractor if we're having issues with our backs. Those of us who are clinicians or therapists, this is the gift that he's given us. Also in Proverbs 11:14, it says, "A nation falls through a lack of guidance, but victory comes through the counsel of many." Proverbs 15:22 says, "Plans fail without advice, but with many counselors they are confirmed." And I guess I could go on and I could go on, but I will say in closing, counseling is also not foreign to the church. There's pastoral counseling that happens. There is marital counseling that happens. And so as a people, I think we need to broaden our perception about counseling, and because it in fact is already a part of what we are doing. Not to mention, there's just such an opportunity for us to continue to, as clinicians, come in to provide tools and resources to support people who are facing a mental health challenge.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'll briefly add to this. Black people, communities of color, we already have this overwhelming mistrust of the medical system. And I'm not going there for that lady to be messing with my head and changing my mind. and 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 the stigma attached to that. And it is the meaning, that we apply to reaching out for to addressing our mental health. Does it signify weakness? Does it signify you're not a faithful Christian? You don't have enough faith. You're doubting. This and the third. And I think what happened is the destruction of these myths in churches, tearing down these barriers, and addressing these stigmas, with truth. Jesus was a counselor. He
Yes.
counseled
Absolutely.
12 disciples for
Absolutely.
3.5 years.
Yes.
Mhm.
Some of them didn't get it, some of them did. And even I think it's in the book of Isaiah, the great consolator.
Mhm.
He's a consultant. He's a
Mhm.
counselor to
Yep.
those who are in need. And I think knowing also that you can look for individuals or therapists who share your faith, who share your belief. This idea of it being secular, and the view, they're not godly. The views aren't Christian. That psychology, it's not biblical, not Bible. But the truth is, things have changed. We have practitioners who are people of color, who are culturally competent. They're informed. They understand the struggle, and they're relatable. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So.
Absolutely.
And if I could add one more thing too, just in what Pastor Lori was saying, even in John 14:26, it says, "But the counselor, the Holy Spirit, the Father will send in my name, will teach you all things and remind you of everything that I told you." Um, and also going back to what he originally talked about with stigma connected to mental health, when I am doing an intake with patients, especially when I've been in school based doing work in the field, to seek buy-in from my patients, I'm often not having them focus on the word mental, but the word health. And if we look up the definition of the word health, health means to be without illness or injury. And I think there's, again, opportunity for us to work towards being less of illness, full of illness, and working towards wellness. So I focus more on the positive parts and the idea of becoming healthy. And I ask people if they have an interest in me helping them on three main areas, which would be how you handle your stress, the choices that you make, and how you relate to people. And most of my patients say they want help with all three of those things. And then we usually identify one of those three, so we can begin to identify goals. But, again, focusing on the health part without illness, without injury, and everything else that Pastor Lori said.
Wow. So I'm going to go to Mrs. West. There's a lot that's there, but I'll wait to the end for that part. Mrs. West, is it normal to feel confused, feel a sense of guilt, or feel like you are in a fog after a loss?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm going to invite my fellow panelists to jump in on this too, because there is so much one can say on this particular issue. Even before the pandemic, anytime we experienced a significant loss or in a grief, a place of grief, it has been difficult then. So the pandemic only added to it, really. I mean, this sense of fog, we were already in it, not knowing what to expect tomorrow, whom we would lose tomorrow. Would it be a family member? Would it be a friend? Would it be someone significant in our lives? I mean, yes, the fog increased significantly after the pandemic. So, yeah, guilt feelings, sense of not doing enough with those people who may have been, whose lives might have been, taken, or lost, the sense of fear and all this craziness that was going on during the pandemic. We were experiencing a lot. And a fog, yes, that's putting it mildly. We were consumed at that time. But I am so thankful that because of folks like Pastor Tomlin and my colleagues here and you, Dr. Fleming, you're putting this information out so that others will know that it is okay to grieve. It is okay to feel what you're feeling. It's important to acknowledge what you're feeling. If you're in a fog, talk to somebody. There are so many people, as Ms. Jessica just mentioned, that you could, and resources that you can tap into. So yes, a fog, yeah, we can come out of the fog. Colleagues, please join me.
I wanted to add, if I could, I'm sorry, y'all, just concerning the loss, my brain is spinning right now. The loss within itself is, I think, an illustration of two things. Number one, it requires our faith, right? In the process of us losing, I know I actually counseled a family through the Department of Mental Health and did TFCBT for a family who lost a 2-year-old to COVID. And so that family within itself, had to lean on God for faith. But then the trauma, right? So TFCBT stands for trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy. So if there is any time where you seek mental health, it is the aftermath. It is the aftermath of COVID, where we, again, have probably seen rises in trauma, right? Rises in anxiety and in depression.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wow. Is there anyone else with that before I go on to the next? That's loaded.
It is very. I was going to say, lots of work. Grief is very near and dear to my heart. So, unfortunately, but it's. Can I just say, and I'm going to be very honest and real because I'm a pretty direct person. It breaks down everything we know about being super. We exist in super all the time. We've always been taught to be strong. We've always been taught not to let anybody see us cry. Don't show emotions. That shows weakness. But doggone it, when you lose a loved one, it breaks you up inside. Your emotions are all over the place. Oftentimes when clients come for grief counseling, they are debilitated at their time. They're not eating or sleeping. They can't make sense of it. And you know why? Because we live to that expectation that I got to keep going. Oh, you got something else going on? Let me pick up and carry that bag too. So we like to pick up bags and carry our stuff and other people's stuff. So grief is that thing that brings big, strong men to their knees. And the strongest woman has a hard time moving on. The loss of a child or just a loved one. Emotions are real. That's what separates us from animals, is our emotions, believe it or not. We have a choice. So when I say that, and I want to say this, it doesn't matter if it's a year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, you have triggers. This COVID-19 triggered so many people from losing others in the past that it shook us. It shook us. There were families who were burying 2 and 3 people. It just broke up every sense of stability that we have ever known. And then added that we didn't get to go through the pomp and circumstance that we were used to with grief. We're doing graveside services because we could not bury them and be in church and get that comfort. For us believers, being in church and singing those hymns and being in that place of togetherness gives us a sense of comfort, in our weakest hour. Now we're standing around the grave to send our loved ones off. So that was a break in our normal that we were used to. So grief is that thing that we don't like to talk about and we try to keep hidden, but it is very, as I said before, very dominant, and it will make its way known if you don't deal with it where it's at.
Yeah.
I'm loving that. If you don't deal with it, it will deal with you.
Yes.
Right.
Indeed.
And part of our job, I know one of the questions that we're going to get to is about those triggers, just to touch on it real quick. Oftentimes patients are coming to us and they don't even know what the trigger is. And we can discuss that in the next question, but it's subliminal, it's small. The brain is an amazing machine, and it has the capacity to store memories and associations with not necessarily negative things, but positive things, that is all packed in one area.
Wow. And so as you were talking triggers and what's debilitating, and I love, Dr. Fields, you talked about the super complex, Grey's Anatomy, kind of like the superwoman, the things that we are taught even by television, and what's reinforced, that reinforces how much we hurt ourselves or harm ourselves, because we got to be so strong. And so Dr. I'm going to say Dr. Okay, Reverend Tomley, Dr. next. You see, I just already said it. Can you let's talk a little bit about the difference between grief, depression, anxiety. You hear people using it and they interchange it, or it's not them, it's somebody else, and until it's too late, or I call it hashtag until it happens to you. So can you talk a little bit about the differences is there a difference? And then everybody please chime in.
Yeah, so clinically speaking, there is a difference between the two. However, they can share symptoms. They can kind of cross over on each other. Grief, in a nutshell, is basically this, an overwhelming, feeling of distress as it pertains to the loss of a person, or a living thing. I don't know if the DSM qualifies the loss of an animal as grief, but it is, okay? But we have significantly lost people. The thing about grief is that it's normal. Everyone experiences grief in some way, shape, or form. It can be the loss of a relationship, a marriage, a job. You grieve that thing, okay? Where grief becomes an issue is when there is a persistent yearning for the loss. These thoughts of longing to have it back, longing to be reunited and connected with it until it interferes with your social life, education, your employment, and so I think in the DSM it says that grief is normal unless it's beyond 6 months. Well, we've been grieving since 2020.
Right.
A lot of folks, because there has been significant loss, and change. Now, depression is somewhat different in that there doesn't have to be a loss in order to be sad. Okay. Sometimes grief can trigger depression. It can be the onset of the depression. So if you're stressed, a lot going, have to experience you end up experiencing the loss of a close, loved one. It can, kind of evolve into depression. As a clinical diagnosis of depression, it is it's pretty intense to actually reach that level of a clinical diagnosis for depression. Feeling sad, feeling empty, hopeless, worthless, um, preoccupied with death, wanting to, exploring thoughts about life without you in it, um, being kind of slowed down, slowed speech, not getting out of the bed, overeating, eating, gaining weight, losing weight, um, all of these things, loss of motivation, not wanting to do things that were once exciting and pleasurable. So, and some people even experience hallucinations, and delusions. So, one of the main things you find with depression is irritability. You sick of everything. You tired of everybody. You tired of the church, the preacher, the choir, the music. You just sick of everything. And and this is occurring. Now, we all experience grief and depression. It doesn't mean it's an issue. Okay, that's normal. But it's when it happens more times than not. It's occurring just about all the time, throughout the day, every day. And it is prohibiting your life. It's causing you not to be able to function and go about your daily duties. I answered the question of grief and depression. Anxiety is different. It looks different. It is experienced a lot different. Usually, anxiety is, they say, an irrational fear. But I often teach patients that, um, about changing their relationship with anxiety, changing the narrative between your conscious self, your spirit, your soul, whatever you want to call it, and the anxiety. Anxiety is not a sign of danger all the time. It occurs in the body. And so, the body, our autonomic nervous system, it learns from the past. It's learned that maybe this has been, you had a bad experience, you were embarrassed, you were made to, you were talked about, or you were injured, someone attacked you, you faced danger, you thought you would die. Okay. So your body automatically is like a built in security system. It senses a familiar. It senses something that it has experienced in the past, and it will respond to the environment, to a stimulus that you may not consciously have any idea of why you feel the way you feel, but your body does. And so, changing the narrative on what that means. I teach patients to ask their body, what are you trying to tell me? How are you trying to protect me? How are you trying to keep me safe? Now, my consciousness has to evaluate the scene because my body is not aware of present information. It doesn't live in the present, it lives in the past and tries to bring it into the present moment. All right. Am I safe? Is there danger? Am I overreacting?
Yes.
Yeah. And just listening to yourself and knowing that it is very normal. You don't have to, don't believe everything you feel and everything your body tries to tell you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
I hope that answers your question.
It
In some way.
did.
Good
It,
job. Absolutely.
and I think it was very interesting that you said anxiety is that irrational fear, because I think it's interesting how whether it's conscious or unconscious bias and what people would consider to sometimes be irrational for some may not actually be irrational in the mind of the person experiencing it, right? Like
Of
getting on
course
an
not.
airplane when you haven't flown
Yes.
in 2 years, or the things, or somewhere, and I call it the C word, that people will throw that out. You're just crazy. And I'm like, to me, that's something that should be out of everybody's lexicon, or words, because that is a part of what then further makes people become isolated or not want to be
Right.
affiliated or a part. So
Well,
I'm going to add,
and we call it irrational. We call it irrational because, okay, for instance, if you use the example of the airplane, okay, it is normal to have anxious about getting on an airplane if you haven't flown, or if you haven't
Mhm.
flown in a long time. That is completely normal. Uh, so when you are on the airplane and the airplane begins to shake up and down, it is rational to become fearful.
Yes.
Right? That is a rational response. You don't know what's about to happen.
right.
We call it irrational because if you are not on the airplane yet and nothing is happening, what is the fear is not real yet and may not be manifested as true fear.
Absolutely.
Does
Yep.
that make
Right.
sense?
Yep,
Yes.
it makes it,
Mhm.
and and
Absolutely.
that's great, because I think for such a broad audience to have so many of you and to be able to break it down in layman's terms is important, because I think sometimes people will say things, and when folk don't understand, it's like, ah, it wasn't talking to me. And
Yeah.
and Miss Rojas, this is going to bring us to you with the talking about that. You brought up trauma and impact and talked about that a few times. Can you
Mhm.
talk about the impact of trauma on our body, mind, and soul? And can you actually define trauma first?
I certainly can. I love tonight's discussion. This is an amazing discussion that we're having. So I will define trauma, and trauma is anything that a difficult time in our life that we are having a problem letting go of and moving forward. And going back to what everybody discussed today, sometimes our patients are coming to us and they don't even know that it's trauma that they're actually dealing with, right? Like on some level, we've all had childhood trauma, right? And there's these triggers, as Dr. Fields was saying, and Pastor Tomlin was saying, that are occurring and are happening, and we're not even aware as a people and as clinicians and as therapists. What we actually do is help to identify those triggers for our patients, and that's through a series, for me at least, sessions before we get to those places. Just to touch on some of the things that Pastor Tomlin was saying. Um, our brains are a magnificent machine, and within the brain we have the limbic system. The limbic system is the part of the brain that involves our behavioral and emotional responses. And so, connected to what he said as well about anxiety, sometimes anxiety is actually not really a bad thing. To kind of put it in layman's terms, anxiety actually serves a function in times when we need to be safe. So if a dog is chasing you or you see somebody trying to rob you, your body kind of goes into that kind of mode where it protects itself to fight, flight, or freeze. And so I could go on, but certainly trauma has a place within the body, as he was talking about, holding a place. But connected to the limbic system, within the limbic system is a thing called the amygdala. And so the amygdala is a place where we actually store memories, and also where we put negative associations with things. So I'll give you an example. I did at TFCBT with a patient of mine who was a witness to domestic violence. And the day that that domestic violence happened, she wore a pink shirt and so did her mother. And so there was an association between the color pink for her on the visual. So again, the associations that we're able to make. And then going back to what he was saying, part of what we do in TFCBT work is to have awareness within our body. What is our body trying to tell us when certain things are happening? We discussed the case today of a patient who was responding negatively to one of our therapists at Department of Mental Health. And I told one of my colleagues that it's very possible that she's the stimuli. blonde hair used to be a thing for one of my patients. They didn't like people with blonde hair because their abuser had blonde hair. So it could be anything. And again, the signs within the body could be trembling. It could be sweaty palms, and having awareness is the first step into understanding what's going on with you.
Wow.
Can I just say that all of what I heard kind of essentially from everyone is that we are creatures of habit. We stick to things that we know. Our bodies respond to things that we feel or have felt before. Not trying to be funny, even in, let's say, a domestic violence or abusive situation, that the person will go back to the abuser because it's not different. I can expect this person to come home and treat me like crap, but it's what I know. It is what I'm used to. So getting out of the house away from this person that hurts me is different. It's out of the ordinary. I get frustrated when I have to speak in front of large crowds. That is something that they know. That is that security that says, hey, I'm prepared, or I am ready to give this presentation because I have this healthy dose of anxiety. Anxiety to me says, hey, I care about something. It means something to me. So I'm concerned about it. So what I hear, trauma, depression, I wanted to just say, there was a super huge increase of depression from loneliness and isolation during the pandemic. Yes, you can be depressed from being by yourself. It is a serious thing. And I say that because people don't think about that. Very ambitious men and women who work hard and who may not have a partner suffer from this kind of depression often. And if you notice, I don't know if you've noticed that young professionals are the number one increasing population for suicide right now because of the pressures that they are under for performing, but possibly going home to a house by themselves or a home or an apartment. And after they have done all this work and have these very high demanding jobs, there is no one at home to release with and to. So they're carrying this depression and these feelings around with them. So depression, I feel like, is that thing, hey, I want to isolate because it's comfortable for me. If I got to push hard, it's uncomfortable for me. If I have to do something different, it's uncomfortable for me. So what I heard is that in order to increase our mental health, sometimes we have to do things a little differently. We have to break up the norms that we know. We have to try something different. What can I replace this not so great vision or thought with when it comes to trauma and things like that will help me move forward? So I just heard that we are creatures of habit. How do you fight repetition? You incorporate something new. You change things. And we know change is a bad word to some people. We don't use the word change. So it means doing something different. But that's also how great things happen. We make changes when it's needed.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
Excellent.
Dr. Fields, that's going to bring us back to you with this part, because why is self-care, because that's a part of what you really talked about, why is self-care greatly steered towards finances and not mental, emotional, or physical well-being? Whenever we hear self-care, what can I buy? What can you buy me?
Yep. That's another loaded question, Dr. Fleming. I think because, number one, we are a very superficial visual society. We look at looks, we look at hair and nails and clothes, and we automatically think, oh, this person is doing well because they look good on the outside. And so we say, hey, I need to get my nails done. And there's a saying, I'm going to fake it till I make it. So I'm going to look good on the outside and be all tore down and upset on the inside. Nobody will ever know. So I think that's one of the first things why self-care is often physical. I got my nails done. I got my hair done. I got a haircut. Okay, yes, you're outside. But what's really going on in here and in up here? So I don't think that people understand self means saying yes to you, not to things that make you feel good, but habits that make you, how can I say, that put you first. Self-care. Yes, physically, yes, you look great. But what are you doing to really rest your mind? Are you spending time from distractions? Are you putting that cell phone down? You don't have to answer every call, every notification. Hey, I can't talk right now. This is my self-care Saturday. I love you. Hey, ooh, this is a big one. I'm not taking on anything else that I can't put on my plate. I mean, really, one of my favorite activities to do with my clients, we call it the bag lady activity. And we put on Erykah Badu and we listen to the words and we drop off bags as we walk, because we do have bags that we carry. We carry trauma, we carry pain, we carry sadness. And then you know what? Because we help each other. Oh, girl, you got something I got going on. I'm going to pick up and take that too. So then I'm going to pick up and take your bags on as well. So all the while, did you hear what Erykah said? You can't hurry up because you got too much stuff. So what's those things that are dragging you back or holding you back from being the best version of yourself? So self means I'm not going to pick anything else up that myself can't handle.
Yeah. If I could add to that too, first of all, I'm going to give credit to the person who said this word. So Amy Mitchell Washington is an amazing person in my life right now, as my clinical supervisor. And she said, self-care is not what we do. It is what we get out of it. And I will never forget that. I think that is super amazing. Oftentimes when people are coming into my practice, and my practice, I share with Amy as well, in that space, I'm often talking about to them about what things can they do being a DBT therapist to self-soothe. So utilizing your 5 senses, what can you give yourself that's going to soothe you and kind of take it down? Going back to everything Dr. Field was saying, we're living in this rat race and I know what it is because I work a couple of jobs, but we have to be able to say to ourselves, okay, I got to take time out for me. How can I replenish myself? What can I do to fill myself? And whether it's drinking coffee, tea, lighting a candle, whatever it is that's going to soothe yourself, whether it's soft blankets, socks, slippers, getting dressed up, whatever it is that you need to do to feel good. That's what self-care is about. It's about the internal workings. It's not the exterior at all.
Dr. Fleming, may I chime in?
Sure, you may.
With all that my colleagues have just said, it also includes setting those healthy boundaries. I think that's what they both have been referring to. Yes. Setting healthy boundaries. Sometimes you just got to do it because otherwise you will be taken advantage of. And it's important in setting those boundaries that you remember that to slow down, but instead of running around with everybody and filling everybody else's needs, and remembering that self-care is, yes, caring about the other person, but also remembering that I count too.
Absolutely.
And that's boundaries is huge. The power of no.
Oh, yeah.
No. Exactly.
You don't have to say, no, I'm sorry, because if we're going to practice assertive communication, we're just going to say, no, I'm not able to do that. And you can smile and put a bow on it. But you don't have to apologize for your inability or your desire not to do something. It's okay to say no.
Yes. Wow. And that's interesting you say that. I went back to a post I put on Facebook 23 hours ago. And I said, I've been quite busy lately. Someone said, you've forgotten about me. To which I said, no, I remembered me. I remembered me. And I love, Jessica, that you mentioned Amy. I love Amy. I think everybody loves Amy. Exactly. Did you hear the music in the heavens open?
She's the Oprah Winfrey.
And I have to say, though, before I even go to the next, and as we begin to get to the last few questions, I'm so excited because I remember when there was a Amy Mitchell Washington in Mount Pleasant, and none of your faces in some ways were in this area. Alice, you were here with mental health, but there was nobody to refer other people to that were close. So it was always someplace else, and virtual. That was unheard of. So this is amazing to me to see so much, to know so much. Dr. Chanel, to know that there is a manual, a book, and I've sent that to people all over. And people are like, well, I'm only South Carolina. You're gonna have to get licensed other places because I'm sending it around the world because it's necessary. But now, Alice, I want you to think about this. Why should anyone seek therapy? What are some of the reasons? And can it, y'all talked about the fear, but why and when? I'm going to say why and when, because there are a lot of walking wounded people. And I happen to work in a place that has almost 30,000 people throughout this region. And it is really interesting. So why and when, in your
Again, I'm
opinion?
going to thank you. Again, I'm going to invite my colleagues to chime in as well. Why seek therapy? Well, some when we're seeking therapy, we are looking for someone to hear us. Maybe wherever we are not being heard.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be heard. We want to be seen. I know back in the day, our elders would say, kids or folks are supposed to be seen and not heard. And sometimes in business meetings,
Mm-hmm.
depending upon where you are, just be seen, but don't say a word. So please know that. And why would one seek therapy? Because one, they want validation. They want to be heard. They want to be validated. They want to be educated about what is going on, and also what can be changed.
Mm-hmm.
Something must be out of order if you're, not wrong or anything like that, but just something must not be in order. So that's why one would seek therapy. Those are some of the reasons. When should you seek it? I'm going to let one of my colleagues refer to that. But why not seek therapy? What barriers? What are some barriers that come into play when one doesn't seek therapy? It could be cost. It could be the fact that folks in that particular area, they're not familiar. They may not be connected with my issue. They may not understand my culture. They may not know many things about me. And then the stigmas, of course. There are the stigmas, there are the shame. There's so many reasons why folks do not seek it. Now, I'm going to also mention, why is it scary for some folks? Well, again, the folks that they're going into, or the places they're going into, maybe they're not familiar with them, with those places or people. Maybe they have known that maybe they knew people or persons who were not treated properly or treated differently. Again, location sometimes play a role, and then costs. So
Who
that's
else wants
kind of
to
putting it in a nutshell there. And I will
Thank
let
you.
my colleagues elaborate if they care to.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I could certainly elaborate. I would say, in addition to validation, the population that I'm primarily serving right now are women African American women who are uh, in their 30s to 50s, and certainly some adolescents and some even younger children. And a lot of my patients are seeking guidance. Again, kind of going back to that trauma piece, not having positive relationships, not only daddy issues, but mommy issues, and seeking guidance and are looking for nurturance. But I can also say many people, or I should say, and many people are coming also for tools so they can be equipped, so they can learn to handle, because the goal of the therapist is not to be the therapist for 25 years, but to empower and to impart. We are the tools, but then to give tools to those individuals so they can continue to thrive and, again, be resilient, because resiliency to me is the ultimate goal.
Wow. And it's interesting you all would say that. I don't know if you are seeing the chat, but someone says, I sought therapy for an objectable view and perspective on my personal issues. I needed something new. My village was toxic and could not provide meaningful relief. And someone else says, we seek therapy to heal, learn better coping mechanisms, and make sense of our mental states. And if you have questions or something you would like ask, please feel free to place them in the chat as we're going forward, because it shows you, I mean, the chat is going, I'm looking at all parts of social media, I got my phone, I'm making sure I'm not missing anything. But
Mm-hmm.
let me, Alice, when you said something, it made me think of like a TikTok where a little kid goes, hello, stranger. It says almost like you go to this person that you don't know for the most part, but you're not supposed to know them. So it can be objectionable. So it can be objective in the sense. And so one of the questions, and it's probably, winding down, and then we'll leave it definitely for anything that's in the chat before we go to the final question. Reverend Tomlin, I'm going to pose to you first, and then it's definitely open to everybody. Wow, I have people that I got to go on. I'm watching everything. People are just thanking you all. So I need to say that I'm getting private messages saying thank you. Someone said it's not just me, it's not in my mind. So you got people who are on who are just saying this, everywhere. But what can our churches do to help address mental health needs? What can our churches do? I'll start with you, but I'm seeing your head shake, so I'm sure that's going to go to everybody.
Yeah. So, one of the interesting things is that, as a therapist, and most of the my colleagues know that people who are spiritual and have really strong spiritual beliefs, and faith plays a huge role in resiliency and healing. It is a strength
Oh my God.
for the patients and for the
Sorry.
um
Sorry. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. No, I
no, you
apologize.
one of the things that our church, one of the easiest things, which may be one of the hardest, that our churches can do, is make sure that our places of worship is a safe place.
Mhm.
Okay, it needs to be safe.
I love that.
Jesus came to seek and save them that are lost.
Mhm.
He said, "I didn't come to to save those that are well."
Yes.
The church is a hospital. It
Yes.
should be a place that is open for people to receive healing.
Mhm.
Not only can churches pray for individuals with mental health, we talk about that. I mean, that's what we do. But there are other things that we can do. Pastors can go on to get continuing education or to get additional training to know how to identify mental health issues. Maybe some of the predominant ones like depression, anxiety, and PTSD. Um, and knowing for people, knowing when something is beyond your ability, something a particular issue is beyond your expertise. And I think that is a way we help. Even in therapy, if I'm working with a client and their issue is something that I'm not an expert in, I'm calling up Miss Alice. Or I'm calling Chanel.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
hey, I'm going to send this person to you because
Yes.
I think you'd be a better fit.
Absolutely.
And it's about being humble and not being puffed up with pride because it has
Woo.
nothing to do with us.
Woo.
It is about the individual that we are serving.
Mhm.
And our goal is to provide them with the best care and help that we can. And sometimes that means passing it on to
Woo.
someone who can deal with that. Staying in touch with people, even support groups, fellowship.
Mhm.
We used to do that, but
Mhm.
we've gotten away from it. um and connecting, creating partnerships with community providers, or individuals who are experts in the field. You're creating those new relationships, contacting, somebody from my sister's house. Hey, come and do a workshop on domestic violence,
Mhm.
or the stages of violence, cycle of violence. Also, Dorchester, and having someone from the outreach department come and do some of the things that we're doing now, educating congregations. And
Mhm.
one of the other things that I think is really important is us paying attention in our churches, paying attention to the words we use, paying attention to the things we say, calling people crazy, or his head bad,
Mhm.
psycho, lunatic, a fool. We have to be careful
Mhm.
because people internalize these things, and shame, shame is a killer.
Mm-hmm.
Shame is a killer. To be ashamed and embarrassed and humiliated to say I need. And I think one of the other things our churches can do is support our pastors, and knowing that our pastors are not superheroes, that
Absolutely.
they themselves have issues and struggle. And and I think in every church you have people who are close to the pastor, and they can say, "Hey, pastor, how you been doing?" Because if your pastor is strong and well,
Yep.
he can give you he or she can provide you with their best. And just checking on each other.
Mm-hmm.
How you doing? Yeah, but I think we're so busy and consumed with with the cares of this world, and it's so easy to forget about each other.
Who wants to come in? Anyone else?
I'd just like to say one thing is that is pastors are human too.
Hmm.
There you go. There you go.
Hmm.
I was gonna say, yes, ma'am. I agree.
Yeah.
And I love how y'all did that. Healing, help, not hurt. And what came to mind when y'all started, with that and what's going on in the chat, including the twin in the chat and the pastor struggling and everything else, is to say pray, Pray, not pray, Prey. We've
Hmm.
got to make sure the differences. And I'll go as far as to say, you all, because a question that's not on here, that one of the last ones before I ask about the local and national resources, is this: what do you do to make sure you are well? Because it has to be heavy, taking on the load of every client, official or not, unofficial.
Hmm.
Because the family, we want to come and get advice too.
Hmm.
What do you do to be able to release? I see Jessica's hands up first. What do you do?
Okay. Yes. So I have to go back to Pastor Tomlin real quick, and I have to talk about that non-judgmental stance.
Hmm.
That is so important for the church to have. People should be able to be authentic about what is actually happening, and feel like they can be safe. And when they feel like they don't want to share certain things, that's where we can come in, where we can offer confidential spaces for people to really talk about what's going on. Um,
Hmm.
Personally, as a DBT therapist, dialectical behavioral therapy, there's a huge spiritual component. That DBT is there are four main elements: mindfulness, interpersonal effectiveness, emotion regulation, and distress tolerance. A true DBT therapist, I was trained actually in Marshall's school. Marshall Linehan developed DBT,
Mm.
and I did that virtually. I would say I didn't do that. That was during the pandemic, but I did do it. And they say a true DBT therapist is a person who's practicing those things. So I can say for myself, I am a product of the therapy that I utilize with my patients. And
Hmm.
my goal as their therapist, one of the biggest things I try to offer as a tool is to cultivate their wisdom. Everybody has innate wisdom. That
Hmm.
wisdom, that intuitive nature, that little silent voice from my professional and clinical and spiritual perspective, it is the voice of God. So for me, prayer is everything. God is everything. And then to know that I have those tools that I can put on top of it, and praise be to God, I can crush it. I'm gonna crush it. I'm gonna shut it down, beat it down, and I'm gonna share it with everybody that I possibly can who I meet.
Hmm.
So a couple of things real quickly. Number one, I feel like it kind of just piggyback a teeny bit on what Pastor Tomlin said, not to be a place of condemnation. So if they do come, they don't automatically throw you out the door. They don't oust you from the church. Yes, you had a baby out of wedlock. Don't make them stand in front of the church and apologize and all of that. That's going to shoo them away from church, because God said, come, all of you. And some of his best disciples betrayed him. So let's think about what message we're putting out. I think a lot of people think some church is a place of judgment, and it should be a place where we're building camaraderie and bonds. And yes, this is a place where you can be loved and healed. I piggyback, and I
Hmm.
say this all the time. I'm a big proponent of this. You can't pray everything away. Grief, you can't pray away. You can't, it's a process. It takes time, it takes effort. It's not something that happens overnight.
Mm-hmm.
So along with judgment, I also say that there needs to be a mental health or some kind of wellness ministry at every church that includes mental, physical, emotional health or wellness, so that whatever therapists or mental health people you have, they are in a group. There needs to be a resource book at every church that has local therapists or local groups that allows people. So whenever they come to the pastor and say, hey, I'm dealing with A, B, and C, here's some resources that you can go to. Of course, they changed the suicide number to something different. Yes, we have pamphlets, but do you have a resource that says, hey, here's someone that you can go to? I have something for you. And honestly, pastors being, like you said, being willing to say and suggesting, y'all just don't know how much it means for a lay person to hear their pastor say, you need a therapist. It changes the whole dynamic of mental health, because we do know to go to the church for everything or for help. When they say, hey, this is out of my realm, or pastors say, I can counsel you spiritually, but you need a mental health therapist or you need a counselor. Self-care, I take off on Fridays. Fridays is my day that I try not to do too much of anything. I say that's my rest day. I will do some things here and there, but I regroup on that day. I spend time with people who pour into me. That's one of the most important things that I do for self-care. I surround myself with positive people and who are going to fill my cup, who are not pulling from me, but are trying to fill me back up.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, there are two last, but this one is kind of that interesting one that was sent in, and I want to make sure, because I'm recognizing it's a privilege to know what to expect because I've spent years with counseling. There are people who really believe you come in, you got to lay on a couch or lay on somebody's floor or somebody's doing stuff around your head, because that's what you see on TV, right? Or that's what you know. What can people expect if they were to come to your practice, if they were to come to see you? We heard Dr. Fields talking about playing Erykah Badu and doing Bag Lady. We heard Jessica say, I know we're going to talk about this family thing. We're going to talk about the spiritual component. You heard Alice talk about the people who come and, over the years and just the conversations and the depth. And then you've heard Reverend Laurie talk about, sometimes it just has to be what it is. And you got to say, hey, even if I'm not the person, and refer. So what can people expect when they come to
you? Well, I will say this. Therapy is a relationship. It's a collaborative relationship. Collaborative. Okay? You and the therapist work together. And, one of the main things that you'll see just in general, some people do have a couch. I have a couch, and folks love laying on it. Okay. Once they've gotten comfortable, but what in a normal setting, of course there's paperwork, you sign agreements, the consent forms, then the therapist, once you are there for your appointment, the therapist will go over the limitations of confidentiality with you, explain it to you, answer any questions. And then, probably maybe the first or the second, session is really spent on getting to know you. You really presenting why you're there, what your goals are, what you want to work on, what's been bothering you, what symptoms you experience, how long you've been dealing with this. And just to give the therapist a general view, because we are complex people, and you don't go in there, you're not going to tell them everything. You can't get it all in 1 hour, nor 2 hours.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes time, and sometimes, they don't need to know all of that. Okay. It just depends on what you're doing. Every office, every relationship with between you and a therapist is going to look different, because we are individuals and we all have an individual style. We all have an individual perception or a theological perspective, not theological, but modality that we use, and we kind of use as the foundation of our thinking and treatment suggestions. Okay. But it is a collaborative relationship where you and the therapist work together. If you're feeling unheard, you can fire your therapist and find another one.
There you
You
go.
can tailor the therapist to your spiritual beliefs, or if you want a therapist, if you're a black a female, African American female, and you want to speak to an African American female, you can search for an African American female.
Mhm.
Same with African American males. Now we are limited, so you may be on a waiting list for a very long time to get an African American male, but thank God there are some out there. And I've seen some new faces, and so it will look different, and it's not going to be the same. You have some that assign you homework. You have the DBT, the CFCB, the TFCBT, the EMDR. I'm an EMDR therapist, so I use a completely different looking therapy sometimes to address certain things.
Yeah.
But you know, they have all been scientifically or evidence based, and it just depends on the personality of the therapist on what details of the therapy session will look like.
Yeah.
And
Right.
you all can
Yeah, anyone else?
I'll
I
try.
think
add to.
Go ahead, Dr. Fields.
that was Miss West.
Oh, Miss
Go ahead,
West.
Miss.
Oh, okay. I just, I'm a short answered person. So, what I was saying, what one can expect when they come into my office is that, or go into that first session, is to know that I am respectful of you. That's number one. Number two, I am going to be aware that I am not the expert of your story, and you know your story better than I do. So I need to be quiet to some degree and just listen and be respectful and offer you an opportunity to be calm, a calming atmosphere where you can just share as much as you care to without any push or whatever, because we have time, as Reverend Tomlin said, to elaborate and go further and explore more. So respect, I think, is the first order of the day, and a sense of it's okay to be here.
Thank you. Anyone else?
The last thing I want to add about that, giving odes to another amazing giant in my life, Cynthia Williams Washington. And I spoke the other day, and we talked about that the relationship between the patient and the therapist is an intimate relationship.
Yes.
So that relationship will take some time to develop, and it certainly is the patient's right to determine whether that intimacy can be shared with that therapist. I think from my standpoint, and probably for everyone else here, we are licensed professionals. Okay, so we're held to a standard. There's something called confidentiality, and I think that's a big piece to mention for people. When they come into us, it is a safe place for them. We are mandated reporters, so if there is suicidal ideation or homicidal ideation, especially for minors and for people who may be vulnerable, then we have to report. Outside of that, it's a safe place. So you can come in there, let your hair down, talk about your issues, stuff that other people don't know about, and know that it stays right in that space. So that's the only thing I wanted to add to that.
Good.
I just say one of the lines I always say, and I just leave it at this: only thing I ask for from you in therapy is to be your authentic self. Whatever space that's in, whatever way you're feeling, mad, sad, happy, upset, pissed off, bring it all to therapy. We can't fix it if I don't know about it. That's just
Hey,
what
I love it. And I want to address some things that are in the chat, and then we'll go to the final question. That pastors need pastoring too. Places of worship need to be a safe space. Daniel says, what I do is nurture my interest and curiosity, connect with wonderful and beautiful friends, and allow myself to be vulnerable and dependent on the people who love me. It's okay to ask for help, and that's as a counselor. Grief takes time. Don't rush it. Shame is a silent killer. I really wish the traditional church had more support for singles, especially professional singles. And I'm saying these out loud for folk who may not know how to get to the chat, see the chat, or because anybody, whether you at church, go to a church, used to go to a church, your mom and them in a church, send us to your folk now, because people are telling you what they need. And if that's the hospital, I'm just saying, you used to go to the hospital when you're sick. Okay, I remembered me. I think important conversation that needs to be had is mental health as it relates to rural communities. Rural communities lack the resources to accommodate the mental health needs of the people. He said, I fired 3 therapists already. Me too. You can't pray everything away. And then therapy is making sense of the junk in your mental trunk. I love it. It's an inventory process to learn what to keep out of the junk, what to get rid of, and understand how the junk impacted or impacting your life. And so looking at that, listening is basic respect. And someone says, and I'm saying someone, although their names are here, I don't want to call out people's names. I personally meet with my therapist online. My meetings are virtual, safe. Most of my appointments are done in the comfort of my home. And so you see all of this. So for everyone who is on, that is, I won't say it's easy, but this is opening a door, because the last question that I want to pose, unless you have some, and there has not been any others in the chat or private message, is going to be this. I'm gonna pose a question and then go through again in the same order that we have been for closing statements or remarks from each of our panelists. And the last one is going to be, what are some local or national resources to contact for mental health or substance abuse or domestic violence services? And whether you have to get back with us, whether you want to say some of them, and we can put things in the chat. If you send them back to us because you have a resource or some type of repository, we can always post them with Dr. Glenn, as well as Reverend Tomlin and myself. We can post them online, but we just want to know, what are some resources that are available for services?
Well,
and anyone can begin. Thank you.
Well, first of all, and what is most close, I believe, to most of us, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there are at least 17 mental health centers across the state of South Carolina. So there's one in every, if not a main facility, there are satellite offices in all 46 counties of South Carolina. So that's a given. Locally here, we have Charleston Dorchester Mental Health. And of course, their number is
842-4100.
4100. And the Somerville office number is 843-873-5063. Berkeley Mental Health is right there across the road there too, 843-761-8282. Of course, we have mobile crisis that's connected with most of the mental health centers, I believe. Ms. Jessica, correct me if I'm wrong. And their number is 843-414-2350.
Correct. And they're open 24 hours, you guys. Most of the Charleston County Mental Health Mobile Crisis is open 24 hours, and we serve basically the whole state. So if ever there's an issue or crisis from one DMH employee to the other, we are always available. So again, 854, what do we say? 854, now I'm forgetting the numbers, 414-2350.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's correct. And of course, there's Palmetto Behavioral Health, 843-747-5830. There's NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Health, where you can, they have groups and everything, and you can stay connected with that population at any time, get resources, newsletters, and whatnot each month. Of course, Dr. Fields mentioned that there was a suicide hotline, I believe. That number was changed, I think, earlier this year. The National Suicide Hotline is 988 now.
Yes,
Am I
ma'am.
correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, 988. And you can also you can text them, you can phone, they have a phone number. SAMHSA is the substance abuse, that's SAMHSA. They have resources galore regarding alcohol and drug, as well as mental health So you can always go on and check that out. And of course, there's Psychology Today that has a plethora of resources that you can tap into, be it an individual private therapist, a group, whatever group sessions or that may be available out there, psychiatrists, whatever you need.
Mhm.
So that's
Mhm.
Psychology Today, and you can,
Mhm.
and they're all over the United States. You can tap in, put in the therapist's name, or wherever you are, you can put in your state, your city, and get a therapist in that particular state or area. So just to name a
Mhm.
few colleagues.
I concur. Only thing I wanted to add was the Charleston Center for Substance Abuse. Their phone number is 843-958-3300. And again, like she said, Psychology Today, BetterHelp, all of those.
Mhm. Well, my sister's house, I don't have their number, of course, for domestic violence and battered women. And Dorchester Alcohol and Drug, I believe their number is 843-871-40, maybe it's 873-4790.
So I know we're going to get all of these from you because we need to have this so folks can have them. I want to go over the last some things that's in the chat, and then I will go in the order that we've been going in for you to give your closing remarks. My therapist is a Black female who is well versed in many cultural issues. She sees me and she's relatable. Doesn't that really apply to what everyone was saying today? Someone sees you because, you know, it's easy to be invisible, right?
Yeah.
COVID changed the game. There aren't many excuses left. Own your health and mental health. Someone says, my therapy consists of homework, daily writing journal entries, and having a live online meeting once a week. So for those who, you know, don't make time, no better person to make time for yourself. You heard the great discussions. It's no excuse anymore. Amen to safe place. And then we go, I don't know why it bounced back up. We have to take ownership. Man, this is beautiful. Brown on brown support. That is true. And this goes for those on Medicaid and Medicare. Love yourself. And I think one of the things we have to acknowledge, the elephant in the room, and, you know, I work specifically with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think it is always interesting to me that it can be anybody who's of majority or European status, and no one ever says it's all the white people or all European people. But when it's all people of color, people who are marginalized, Black, whatever it may be, then it's all of a sudden, you know, that people think, oh, well, what's wrong? No, nothing. Nothing. It's people want, you know, concordance, whether it's racial concordance, whether it's gender concordance, whether it's gender, you know, whatever it may be, sexual orientation. And we've got to be mindful to give people what they want and what they need. We each have different tastes. So with that being said, I just want to thank everyone. And then because we're going to close out with your statements. Thank you, Reverend Tomlin, who, when we were coming up, it was going to be the church's role. But he said, what do you think about mental health? I'm like, what do you think about mental health? Right? Because it was, you know, this could go many different ways. And, you know, people get all kinds of courage sometimes, right? When they're in a chat. But it was necessary, and I'm so glad this could be this is a part of a grant that we were awarded, and to be able to offer things like this in the community. And we have heard about the rural component, because our churches are definitely in rural Ridgeville and Dorchester. But what we know with virtual is that it's everywhere. So if somebody could not be on tonight, share the link with them. If there's things that can be done, there are resources, you know, all of these new faces, for some maybe new, may not be, but there are so many resources. And I want to thank each of you as we then have our closing remarks, starting with Dr. Fields, then going to Mrs. West, then going to Reverend Tomlin, and then Ms. Rojas, unless Reverend Tomlin, you want to switch that so you can end.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you all. So I will yield to each of you to give your closing remarks, and thank you so much.
I'm so proud to be on this platform with these awesome, amazing, intelligent, and stellar Black excellence. And so I appreciate the opportunity to be present with them on this evening. I believe that, as I said earlier, you can live well. Do not be afraid of what can come next. Also, you don't have to live your life on emergency or being super all the time. Emotions, sadness, things like that are natural parts of life, but you can get up again if you decide to do the work, take charge of your life, and remember to choose joy. I can be found on, I have my own website, www.takingthefirststep.net. And also, the Healing Group is a group of 21, 22 mental health professionals, licensed social workers, licensed professional counselors, and life coaches that are across the state of South Carolina. We are trying to grow this body. We are also a group that gives back to the community. So we saw the need. This arose in the pandemic. It is something I believe God gave to me. And so I went out and gathered those who are near and dear and close and said, hey, let's do something to provide opportunities for people of color to know that we are unicorns and that Black mental health professionals do exist. It has been my pleasure, and I hope that you'll take steps to live well.
Thank you, my awesome team. Thank you for your help. Thank you, Reverend Tomlin, for providing this platform and an opportunity to bring awareness to the community. Thank you, Dr. Fleming, for an awesome job at facilitating this process. I would like to say that to all of the audience out there, that there is help, there is positive health, there's hope, and there's healing for each one of us. Why do I say that? Because we all count in God's eye. I think we should be kind to ourselves, practice positive self-care, love yourself, and reach out if there's a need. God bless you.
Greetings, everyone. Have a good evening. I want to say that. I just want to say praise be to God that someone said in the comments earlier, the brown on brown. I am on brown and brown excellence. And it is wonderful to see everyone on tonight. And so what I want to do is I want to leave with the definition of problem thoughts. And problem thoughts, for those of you who are listening, because I like to educate, problem thoughts are thoughts that we have that are either not true, they do not help us feel good, and they do not help us make good decisions. And if you are having some of these problem thoughts, the resources have been administered, and then you can come back on later on and take a look at the resource list that we have. Don't hesitate to reach out. There is help. There are people that look like me, that look like you, who are spirit-filled and who have the education, the knowledge, the training, and want to equip you with the tools. So again, reach out. And I would lastly say that it ain't over. Okay, you have the ability to rewrite your story. Thank you.
Again, I want to personally thank everyone, all of our panel, our moderator, Dr. Fleming, Dr. Glenn, for doing our technical work in the background. She has made this a very easy and smooth process, so I appreciate all of you. I will say in closing that one of the things, realities that we do have to face is oftentimes, we are not in control of the family and the community in which we are born into, sometimes where we live, sometimes our circle. They're meaningful people, they're loving people, we care for them. But we have all been created in the image and the likeness of God, and created with different capacities. And one of the things that we do have to, accept, embrace, is that sometimes the people that we're planted around, or that are planted around us, help. They're trying their best, but sometimes they're not helpful. They don't have the capacity. They don't have what we need. And one of the things that I often encourage, patients to do is, just because the people around you can't help you and you're always helping them, it doesn't mean you can't get help. It doesn't mean you can't learn where to look for help and how to find it, because there are people out there who can help. You know what you need, and you'll know it when you get it. Okay. So again, take care of you. Uh, uh, do what you need to do. Take control of your life. Stop controlling things you can't control, but you can take control of you. God has given you that power to move forward and to ask for help if you need help. Again, I appreciate you. Take care of you. Spread this video, share the link. It will be posted. It is not going to come down. I don't know what Facebook does with stuff that we do live all the time. I think, I don't know if it's easy to access, but it is on YouTube as well. And that will remain forever, hopefully. All right. Thank you all and have a blessed and good night.